Grim morning and welcome to the Grim. I'm your host, Kristen. On today's episode, we'll be opening the gate and entering Norton Cemetery, located in Union County, Tennessee. The aroma of coffee mingles in the air. The gates stand open. Step carefully. It's time to descend into the hauntings of history. The summer arrives wrapped in warm sunlight and birdsong, drawing people toward scenic overlooks, winding trails, and long afternoons beneath the trees. Most visitors who wander into Tennessee's state parks come searching for peace, a quiet escape from the noise of ordinary life. But tucked deep within the hills of Union County lies a trail where the forest carries something heavier than silence. Its name alone feels like a warning whispered through the trees. The Ghost House Trail. Stretching just over a mile through dense Appalachian woods, the path winds past abandoned home sites, forgotten settlements, and a lonely cemetery slowly sinking back into the earth. The trail rests inside the Big Ridge State Park, near the small town of Mayardville, about 25 miles north of Knoxville. Covering nearly 4,000 acres, the park sits within the Appalachian Ridge and Valley region, where steep wooded ridges surround quiet lakes and hidden hollows. But beneath that beauty rests a much darker history. Long before this land became a state park, these woods were home to isolated settlers carving lives from unforgiving terrain. Small communities stood scattered throughout the hills, connected only by narrow dirt roads and hard survival. Cemeteries appeared beside cabins and churches, quiet reminders of how fragile life could be in the wilderness. Illness, violence, and tragedy were never far away. Big Ridge State Park was established during the 1930s as part of the massive Norris Project, developed through the combined efforts of the Tennessee Valley Authority, the National Park Service, and the Civilian Conservation Corps. Entire communities across the region were displaced, homes vanished, farms disappeared, roads and settlements were swallowed by forests and rising water. Yet traces of those earlier lives remain scattered throughout the hills. Long before the park existed, these hills sat on the dangerous edge of the early American frontier. In 1783, pioneer Henry Sharp established Sharp Station near what is now Norris Lake. Families gathered here seeking safety during a violent and uncertain period of frontier expansion. Violence, though, came regardless. Raids and conflict continued spreading across the region for years, leaving these hills layered with the memory of survival, fear, and death. Perhaps that's why the ghost stories have never fully left. The traces of those earlier lives are everywhere here, if you know where to look. And tucked just off the trail, half swallowed by the forest, one of these traces has been waiting a very long time. Norton Gristmill was originally constructed in 1825 by a man named Tim McCoy before operations passed to Lewis Norton and his sons, the families whose name eventually marked both the mill and the cemetery waiting further up the path. For over a century, locals brought corn here to be ground into meal, and the mill became more than a workplace. It was a gathering place where neighbors traded stories, music, and the kind of folklore that eventually outlasts everyone who first told it. The structure standing today, though, is a reconstruction. The TVA took down the original mill during the Norris Project in the 1930s, and it wasn't rebuilt until 1968 using salvaged machinery and the original millstones. But the legends rebuilt themselves just as stubbornly. Stories have circulated for centuries about a young girl hung near the mill by her own father, accused of witchcraft. Other versions stretch the tale further into a full community trial and a public execution, and a witch whose name no one remembers. The details shift depending on who tells it and when, but no name survives, no record confirms it. But the story keeps returning to the mill the way all dark folklore does, filling the silence where history goes quiet. But Norton Cemetery is very easy to miss. Tucked quietly among the trees like a secret the forest is slowly reclaiming. The cemetery is small and unhurried in its decay. Time and weather have worn many of the stones smooth. Some graves date back to the early 1900s. Others have become nearly unreadable beneath the moss and slow press of roots. The dead here feel distant from the rest of the world, hidden away beneath layers of leaves, roots, and silence. And then there's one small stone carrying only a single haunting inscription, Ibby. No dates, no explanation. just a name lingering alone in the woods. Some have suggested that Ibby may have been the child from the Branham family, a sister perhaps to Dolly, who rests just a few stones away, but no record confirms it. No date survives on her stone, only the name carved into a rock, left in the forest, and the years. There's something, though, uniquely unsettling about forgotten cemeteries, not because they're loud or violent, but because how completely quiet they become. It's easy to understand why stories continue growing around places like this, why visitors speak of strange silhouettes in photographs near the graves, or a Civil War soldier materializing briefly along the trail before vanishing back into the forest. That last legend, though, may carry more weight than most realize. Among the stones rests Hiram Norton. Born in 1844, Hiram served as a private and company H of the Ninth Tennessee Cavalry, a Union regiment organized out of Knoxville in October of 1863. East Tennessee was deeply divided during the Civil War, and members of the Appalachian communities frequently chose the Union side, despite living within a Confederate state. The Ninth Tennessee fought across the region at Cumberland Gap, at Bull's Gap, and at Morristown, where the regiment held the enemy in check for over an hour until their ammunition ran dry. They also rode in Stoneman's winter raid in Virginia in December of 1864, helping destroy the Confederate salt works at Saltville before marching back to Knoxville through the cold. Hiram survived it all. He came home to Big Ridge, lived another half century, and died on May 27th in 1916 at the age of 72. His wife Thursa, born in 1829, outlived him just by over 2 months, dying on August 3rd of the same year. They rest here together, side by side, the couple the cemetery is named after, their long lives quietly bookending an era of war, hardship, and survival in these hills. What the stones in this clearing, though, reveal when read together is that Norton Cemetery is not just simply a collection of neighboring families. It's overwhelmingly the resting place of one family across generations, the Hutchinsons, and the roots that they put down in these hills and never let go. And nearby lie George and Rachel Burnham. But Rachel was no stranger to this ground. Born Rachel Hutchinson in 1853, she was the daughter of Mason and Martha, buried here beside them. When Rachel married George Branham in May of 1877, she carried the Hutchinson name into a new family, but never left the hills where she was raised. She died in 1928, returned to the land that her family had always known. Their daughter Dolly was born on May 15th, 1905, and on January 5th, 1929, at just 23 years old, Mason and Martha's granddaughter, the youngest named grave in this clearing. No cause survives in any accessible record. The Hutchinsons' roots run deeper still. Sarah Pike Branham, whose grave marker has long since disappeared into the earth, was the daughter of Mary Jane Hutchinson Jones, another branch of the same family returning to the same ground. Her great grandson confirmed her burial here, noting that a marker once stood but is now gone. She rests somewhere in this clearing, unnamed among the stones. One of at least 6 unidentified slabs, 8 sunken graves, and one steel marker recorded by the cemetery surveyors when they walked this ground are within. The visible record only tells part of the story. The rest has been reclaimed by moss, root, and time. Then there's a stone that offers almost nothing at all, marked only as Son, with the dates December 7th to June 15th, 1907. A child who lived 6 months and was never given a name on the stone, or if he was, it didn't survive. Just Son, just those 2 dates, just the force slowly pulling the stone back into the earth. And then there's the absence that haunts this place more than any other stone. Mary Hutchinson, the girl at the center of every ghost story told about this trail, the one whose cries neighbors claim to hear from the family home long after her death, whose phantom dog still races through the trees. Her grave, if it was ever marked, has never been found. The spirit everyone comes looking for has no stone, no name in this ground. Mason Hutchinson was born in 1826 and came to these hills as a young man. He married Martha Jane Snoddery in Anderson County in October of 1855, and together they built a life in the hollows of Big Ridge. The census records tell the story in this spare language of numbers and names, a farming household growing year by year, children arriving steadily through the 1860s and into the 1870s. Rachel, John, Nancy, Daniel, Mary, Henry, James, and even an adopted son, John Wallace, taken in alongside the rest. Mary, born around 1869 based on the records, reportedly fell ill with tuberculosis sometime in the years that followed. In those days, tuberculosis delivered a slow and terrible death sentence. Victims faded away little by little, often isolated within their homes while families watched helplessly. Mary reportedly died young, somewhere within the family home in these hills, but according to local legend, death didn't silence her. Some stories claim neighbors heard her crying from within the home long after her burial. Others tell of a phantom dog racing through the forest near the property, its heavy panting echoing between the trees before vanishing into the darkness. Even now, hikers sometimes report unseen footsteps pacing alongside them on the trail. What those same stories rarely, though, mention is that Mason Hutchinson was not simply a grieving father, he was a soldier. He enlisted on August 15th, 1863, at Camp Nelson, Kentucky, serving in Company B of the 11th Tennessee Cavalry, a Union regiment, fighting for the other side than most from his state. His military record spells his name three different ways across its pages: Mayston, Martin, Mastern, as if the record keepers couldn't quite hold on to him. The 11th Tennessee was later consolidated into the 9th Tennessee Cavalry, the same regiment with Hiram Norton, just buried yards away in that quiet clearing, also served. Two men who may have ridden in the same unit, who came home to the same hollow, and now rest side by side in the woods they never left. Mason survived the war. He came home to Martha and their children and the farm. He lived until July 6, 1910, dying at 84 years old. Martha followed him 6 months later, on January 15th. They're buried here together, the patriarch and the matriarch of nearly everything that surrounds them in this ground. And yet the folklore won't let him rest. The wandering figure, the restless spirit, and the man said to move endlessly through these trees, searching, always searching, whether for his daughter, his home, or something the war took from him long before Mary ever fell ill. No one truly knows. A short distance farther through the woods, the land opens onto what remains of the Hutchinson homestead itself, the former home that gave the Ghost House Trail its name. Very little survives. The house is long gone, leaving behind only fragments: a root cellar sinking into the earth, the remains of a cistern, and the outline of an old well. The forest has nearly finished reclaiming the property, yet even in ruin the site carries something, a weight the trees seem to hold carefully, as though the woods themselves remember what once stood here. Places shaped by hardship, though, always have a way of collecting legends the way old cemeteries collect moss. Grief transforms into folklore, names become stories, stories become hauntings, and somewhere along the quiet trail in Tennessee, almost forgotten graves and vanished homes, the past still waits patiently beneath the trees. Maybe the ghost dog never existed. Maybe no phantom soldier walks the trail at dusk. Maybe Maston Hutchinson doesn't wander these woods in the dark. But when the forest grows silent around Norton Cemetery, and the shadows stretch long across the path, it becomes very easy to understand why people believe he does, because some places never fully let go of their dead. For now, the stories of Norton Cemetery slip back into stone, and the dead return to their uneasy rest. Thank you for walking with us through the veil, descending once more into the hauntings of history. The gate is sealed, the veil drawn, yet death keeps no calendar, and so we shall return, as we always do, on the grim.